The passengers and crew of Gol Airlines Flight 1907 experienced an absolutely horrifying final few moments of their lives. At just before 5 p.m. on September 29, 2006, their plane collided with a private corporate jet, slicing off half of the plane's left wing. The Boeing 737 with 154 people on board then tumbled from the sky before structural stress tore the plane apart before crashing into the Amazon rainforest. This seemingly normal day turned out to be one of the deadliest days in Brazilian aviation. The scope of the disaster would soon become clear, as not long after the Gol Airlines flight was reported missing, another plane made an emergency landing at a military airfield. A piece of that plane's wing was missing. A clear realization had been made. These two planes collided in flight. The question now being how and why. The Brazilian aircraft manufacturer Embraer is based out of the southern Brazilian city of São José dos Campos, a city outside of São Paulo. Embraer built their planes at the small airport here. One of Embraer's most popular plane was the ERJ series of airplanes, a sleek, high-performance regional jet with rear-mounted engines. First introduced in the 1990s, the plane has been incredibly popular with airlines operating short-range and regional routes. The plane was well-liked and was the perfect size to warrant a business jet derivative. The Embraer Legacy 600 is a corporate jet variant of the longer ERJ 145 model of their popular plane. XL Air is a Long Island-based charter airline, specializing in corporate jet charters. The airline has a fleet of a variety of different business jets, including Cessna Citations, Gulfstreams, and of course, the Embraer Legacy 600. In September of 2006, XL Air was taking delivery of a brand new Legacy 600 registered as November 600 X-Ray Lima. The plane now needed to get to Long Island from southern Brazil on a delivery flight. On board are 5 passengers, including XL Air executives and journalists. The 2 pilots consisted of 42-year-old Captain Joseph Lepore and 34-year-old First Officer Jean Paul Palladino. Both pilots were extremely new to the plane. Captain Lepore had just 5 hours and 35 minutes logged in the Legacy 600, making the accident flight only his 3rd ever flight in this plane. This was while First Officer Palladino had only 3.5 hours logged, although the First Officer now at this point had some experience on the previously mentioned ERJ series of planes, totaling around 300 hours, so one could argue that the First Officer was more experienced on this aircraft given the planes' similarities. While this Legacy 600 plane was brand new, not everything in the cockpit was. The radio unit had actually been taken out of service from another aircraft. The unit was reported to be faulty, and was repaired by Embraer before being installed on this new plane. On this Embraer regional jet series of planes, the radio unit is located above the flight management computer on the main panel. It includes regular radio communication, radio navigation, as well as the aircraft's transponder. In this accident, the transponder on the Legacy 600 would play a crucial role. We will return to the state of the plane's transponder later. At 2:51 p.m. local time on September 26, 2006, this new Embraer Legacy 600 corporate jet departed São José dos Campos for the first leg of the delivery flight to XL Air. The flight needs to make 2 stopovers in Manaus and Fort Lauderdale before it makes it to Long Island, New York. The plane would take off into the afternoon sky as if nothing were amiss. The flight to Manaus is around 4 hours. 45 minutes later at Manaus Airport, a Boeing 737-800 had just taken off on a flight to Rio de Janeiro, stopping over in Brasilia. Gol Airlines Flight 1907 was carrying 148 passengers and 6 crew members. On the flight deck was 44-year-old Captain Decio Chavez and 29-year-old First Officer Thiago Jordio Crusoe. Both pilots were substantially experienced on this plane. Gol is a low-cost airline, one of the largest carriers in the country of Brazil. Flights between the country's largest cities, including Manaus, are very popular. Because of the city's unique location in the Amazon, it is quite far out of the way compared to the rest of Brazil's metropolitan areas. Air traffic across Brazil is routed along numerous airways. Airways function as a sort of set of roadways in the sky. Aircraft, especially commercial aircraft, do not simply fly wherever the pilot pleases, but rather pilots and airlines are required to file a flight plan. The structure of a flight plan is the same all over the world and contains a set of waypoints. These can be connected by airways. Flights can be filed to fly multiple different sets of airways and waypoints to get to their destination. Between the airports of Manaus and Brasilia exists the Uniform Zulu 6 airway. On this stretch of the airway there are a dozen different waypoints. The collision occurred around halfway along this airway. As a general rule here to avoid traffic conflict, aircraft flying northbound towards Manaus must fly at flight levels numbered evenly, whereas aircraft flying southbound towards Brasilia must fly at odd-numbered flight levels. Both the Gol and XLR flights had planned routes to use this airway and should have easily crossed paths with a difference of altitude of at least 1,000 feet. As was the case in this incident, the Gol Airlines flight had filed a flight plan with a cruise altitude of flight level 370, 37,000 feet, while the XLR Legacy 600, the corporate jet, had also planned a flight plan with a cruise altitude of flight level 370. Once passing Brasilia, it was supposed to descend to flight level 360, 36,000 feet, giving oncoming traffic the required 1,000 feet spacing. It, however, did not descend, and to understand why, we need to take a step back and look at the preceding minutes and the state of air traffic control in Brazil. The flight crew of the Embraer jet had been communicating normally with ATC, being handed off from one controller to another as it navigated the busy airspace between southern Brazil and Brasilia. At 3:55 p.m. as expected, the Embraer jet flew over the VOR located at Brasilia Airport and joined the Uniform Zulu 6 airway. The flight crew would not receive an instruction from ATC to descend as per their flight plan, and so stayed at flight level 370. Unlike other countries, air traffic control in Brazil is handled by the military. The Department of Airspace Control is supervised under the Brazilian Air Force. It's a sort of leftover relic from the time when Brazil was under military rule. In 2006, inexperienced and overworked air traffic controllers found themselves in positions in understaffed control centers handling areas of high traffic volume. The interface that the controllers were using included primary and secondary radar data. This can display not only a plane's position but also a flight number, actual altitude, and an aircraft's planned altitude. To receive altitude information, it requires accurate data from a plane's transponder. Extracted data recorded from air traffic control indicated that the Embraer Legacy was flying somewhat erratically, plunging up and down hundreds of feet at a time. The reason it was recorded like this was because at 4:02 p.m., the aircraft's transponder had been switched off accidentally from inside the cockpit. As to how this happened is somewhat up for debate. Some believe that with the pilots being new to the Embraer's unique systems and interfaces, they may have simply accidentally turned it off themselves. Others have also suggested that one of the pilots, likely the first officer, perhaps used the built-in footrest, which allows a pilot's feet to come very close to contact with the radio panel. Pilots of these Embraer planes would later be notified of this potential possibility. When the transponder was switched off, the ground only then received primary radar data from the plane, which works with a more antiquated method of receiving radar echoes from the physical plane itself. Altitude data from this is much less reliable and explains the unusual recorded altitude readings from ATC. With their transponder now switched off, the Embraer Legacy jet has also lost another key system of modern aviation, the Traffic Collision Avoidance System, TCAS. This system, which interacts with an aircraft's transponder, is supposed to prevent the exact kind of scenario that occurred on this day. All modern aircraft are equipped with this technology to prevent mid-air collisions. Both conflicting planes, however, need to have their transponder on for the system to function normally. As in this case, without it, the flight crew of the Gol Boeing 737 would never get an alert to warn them of air traffic coming straight towards them head-on. The controller that the Embraer plane had been in communication with had also been relieved of duty as the plane was passing over Brasilia. They would not make a mention to the new controller of the need for the Embraer jet to descend to 36,000 feet as necessary. Neither of the controllers would also notice that the plane's transponder had been switched off, as was indicated here on their displays. What was noted on their displays was that the planned cruise altitude of the Legacy jet changed to 36,000 feet, in line with the north-south 1,000 feet rule. The air traffic controller does not clear them to descend, and the flight crew would not mention this either to ATC, although they would soon have communication troubles. Having now passed Brasilia and having joined the Uniform Zulu 6 airway, the Embraer Legacy is flying north along this route at 37,000 feet, flight level 370. It should have now descended to 36,000 feet. All the while, the Gol Airlines Boeing 737 is flying south on the opposing heading at the same altitude. Once the transponder on the Embraer had been accidentally switched off, there was a radio silence between the controllers in Brasilia and the plane. For 24 minutes, neither the plane or controllers would try to contact each other, until the controllers in Brasilia would attempt unsuccessfully on multiple occasions to try and contact the plane with no response. The plane needs to be handed off to another controller as it's now leaving their radar zone, to which it disappeared from radar at 4:38, but continued to fly along the airway. The flight crew of the Embraer would also have trouble contacting the ground shortly before the collision over the Amazon. They would attempt to contact other stations in the area to find an appropriate frequency.
Brasilia, November 600, X-ray Lima.
Brasilia 600, X-ray Lima, Brazilian blind, contact Amazônia 123.32, enable 126.45, November 600 X-ray Lima.
Just trying to reach you. I'm sorry, I was the first frequency for November 600, X-ray Lima, 123 decimal, I didn't get the last two. Brasilia, November 600, X-ray Lima. Brasilia, November 600, X-ray Lima. Brasilia, November 600, X-ray Lima. Sorry. We got some radio problems here. Brasilia, November 600, X-ray Lima. Brasilia, November 600, X-ray Lima. Oh!
Autopilot.
What the hell is that?
Roughly 470 miles southeast of Manaus, at 4:56 and 54 seconds in the evening, the two planes collided over the Amazon rainforest. The large winglet of the Legacy corporate jet sliced around 1/3 to half of the Boeing 737's left wing clean off. This collision tore away the majority of the Legacy's wingtip on that side, as well as damaging part of the horizontal stabilizer located on top of the tail fin. Though the plane was damaged, it was still controllable, to which the plane would soon land at a military airbase, where this photograph was taken showing the damage to the wing. In this scenario, due to lack of radio communication, the Embraer flight crew were able to relay messages to the ground via another aircraft. A freight plane belonging to Polar Air Cargo was able to act as a bridge of communication between the Embraer and air traffic control until it was able to establish itself on the relevant frequencies. In the moment that the Boeing 737 lost half of its wing, the aerodynamic forces which was keeping the plane stable immediately shifted. Having lost half a wing on the left side, the right side was now producing more lift than the left side. Control surfaces such as flaps and ailerons had also been removed from the left wing following the collision. Immediately following this collision, the plane banked over to the left. There was absolutely nothing the pilots could do to save their plane, as it had now been left uncontrollable. The pilots could not even get a moment to evaluate what had just happened to their plane, and were probably left in a state of utter disbelief that their plane had seemingly lost all aerodynamic functionality. The plane would then tumble for around 50 seconds before significant structural stress ripped the plane apart in flight. What you are about to hear is the full cockpit voice recording from the moments before the collision to when the voice recording ended on the Gol flight, and presumably when the plane broke apart. I should warn you that myself, having now listened to many cockpit voice recordings, I particularly find this one to be extremely horrifying due to the total hopelessness that the flight crew were facing with their airplane. The aircraft spun no less than 11 times before the breakup. Because of the fact that the plane was torn apart in the air, there was a larger debris field scattered over a large area. The crash in the Amazon killed 154 people. When the news broke to the flight crew of the Embraer plane that a Boeing 737 went down over the Amazon in the same region they were in when they first reported trouble, it became apparent that the two planes had collided. As the pilots of the Embraer plane were still new to the aircraft they were flying, and while switching between frequencies, their attention was likely directed to their instruments rather than to their view outside. The fallout of this accident resulted in an aviation crisis in Brazil. Controllers adopted a philosophy of work to rule, which contributed to massive slowdown in the aviation infrastructure, causing massive delays and cancellations. Controllers also staged walkouts, and even some reported hunger strikes. The flying public in Brazil was now naturally more cautious about flying. This wasn't helped by the fact that another plane crashed at São Paulo's Congonhas airport less than a year later. Much like the aftermath of the Mount Erebus disaster, the fallout of the accident should be examined in its own video sometime in the future. The investigation into the accident over the Amazon focused a lot on the controllers. Lawsuits began mounting towards XLR and Honeywell, the manufacturer of avionics systems on the Embraer, including the transponder. The Brazilian Aeronautical Accidents Investigation and Prevention Center issued a report which highlighted a multitude of contributing factors, from the failures of the controllers to adequately manage their airspace, but also highlighted how the flight crew of the Embraer Legacy jet failed to pick up on the fact that their transponder had been switched off. The United States National Transportation Safety Board also issued their own report, which stated that both planes involved were following clearances by controllers as they should have, focusing blame on the Brazilian ATC system as a whole. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for watching and making it to the end of another long video. I do know a lot of people do like the longer videos, and if you did like it, be sure to drop a like and subscribe, as there is always a new video every Saturday. I am happy with how this one turned out, and I am looking forward to the next video. There is also some new software that is coming out for the X-Plane Flight Simulator, which I am looking forward to using in videos, so keep an eye out for that. Anyway, it is time once again to thank my patrons for their incredible support to the channel. If you would like to get your name featured here or read out at the end of the next video, as well as getting early access to all new videos, you can join the Disaster Breakdown Patreon from £3 per month, and the link to that will be in the pinned comment below. A thank you to my £5 tier patrons, Aidan Montgomery, Derek Bean, Hector Palmatellas, Jugis, Ken Zachman, Kevin Connors, Christy, Leon Sant Jennings, Marie Innes, MG, Pacman7, Panic Chicken, Surya Melody, So FP, and Sue Shoes. Still having trouble saying that. A very big thanks to my generous £10 tier patrons for their support: Alex, Alex Keller, Ann Sid, Daniel Hendricks, D. Rogers, Mike Milton, Side Effect, Robert Hamilton, Roger Mayer, and Where Are My Cheetos? Thank you all so much, and that is it for me this week. I hope you have a great day and weekend, and I will see you next time. Goodbye!